everyone. I'm sure if you're seeing this video, you're kind of aware that 2022 ended like a whole month ago. So I did try to make this video before we got too far away from like the new year. A lot of stuff has occurred. I had some flooding where I used to live, so I had to move, and it's, I've been starting back classes, and it's really put kind of a real impediment on me making this video. So I'm here now, I'm doing it. I wanted to make this video this year because I did one last year. I'd like to keep it going. I feel like it's a fun series to do, and I did put a lot of thought and effort into making my list of like top 22 albums of the year. So I guess we should really get into that. So this is like all very unscripted, so kind of bear with me. I'm gonna try not to ramble. I'm gonna try to like improvise and just make it all still sound cohesive. So first up, I want to talk about my disappointments of the year. Yes, there were a few albums this year that I listened to and I was like, what the hell? Like, these are awful. And I was actually kind of excited for them beforehand, so it kind of sucked all the more that they were bad. First up, I will say Wasteland by Brent Faiyaz was not a good album. I listened to this while I was on a road trip and I was driving, and it almost put me to sleep. It's very long, very few memorable songs, and the skits take up way too much of the album. Just not a good record, and I was very excited for this. There are some cool songs like Jackie Brown, and of course a lot of the singles that I like, but the actual album kind of is mid, like it kind of sucks. Next up, I would say Too Alive by Yeat. I'm a Yeat fan. I've been a Yeat fan for a while now, since like 2021 actually, when he was coming out with I guess Alive 1. I swear to God, I'm like a real fan, y'all. But going into this Yeat album, which released at the top of the year, I was very excited for it. I expected it to be, I was fearful that Yeat was gonna kind of like more generalize his sound and lean away from what made him interesting, and he kind of did that. I feel like he's on track to becoming more of like a caricature of himself, and this album was just very bloated. Next up is Honestly Nevermind by Drake. Honestly, this album sucks. This album was super boring. I remember listening to this. I'm amazed I got all the way through it. I think I just had nothing to do. And I mean, yeah, what can I say? It's bland, uneventful house music made by a straight guy who completely misunderstands the genre. And I think it's extremely boring, extremely forgettable. The last song was 21 Savage is very good, I would say, but the rest of the album, not good. My last disappointment of the year is Come On The Kids Miss You by Jack Harlow. And I mean, what can I really say about this album that other people haven't already said? It's bad. It's generic. It is playing into all these trends and doing them horribly. And like, Jack is just not charismatic enough to carry an album. And I didn't love Jack Harlow going into this, but I do really like his feature on Industry Baby from last year. That was like my favorite song, like one of my favorite songs of last year, period. So this did really like disappoint me, genuinely. Okay, so before we get into the actual list, I'm going to run through my honorable mentions. Now bear with me, there are a lot of honorable mentions because I listened to a lot of music, and there was a lot of music I loved this year, so I'm going to try to cover it basically all, everything that I wanted. I wished I could put on the list, but I couldn't really, so here we go. Honorable mentions are I Didn't Mean to Haunt You by Quedeca, Her Loss by Drake and 21 Savage, Heroes and Villains by Metro Boomin, Emotional Creature by Beach Bunny, Bronco by Orville Peck, 2000 by Joey Badass, Soul Sold Separately by Freddie Gibbs, Las Runas by Rico Nasty, Louis by Kenny Beats, Ivory by Omar Apollo, I Never Liked You by Future, You Can't Kill Me by 070 Shake, The Family by Brockhampton, Sick by Earl Sweatshirt, I Know Nego by Nego, Only Built for Infinity Links by Quavo and Takeoff, and No Stylist by Destroy Lonely. I am a Destroy Lonely fan. I know lots of people hate on him. but I think he's pretty good. And with that, we can get into the actual list. Again, I'm going to try not to ramble, so if I don't talk super much about every single album here, that's the reason I'm trying to get through this list in a reasonable amount of time with no script. So like, I don't want this to be like 3 hours long. So at 22 is Gemini Rights by Steve Lacy. I know a lot of people love this album. It got a lot of like mainstream attention. Steve really like blew up this year off the back of Gemini Rights. He's just huge. He's becoming like a megastar now. Songs like Bad Habit and Mercury and Sunshine are great and deserve like the airplay and the credit they get. And the rest of the album is also really good. I just love a lot of the tracks here. Like the Cody Freestyle, I think, is a little bit long, but it has a cool atmosphere, and Buttons is another good song. Static is a great song as well. This album is very short, and I feel like if anything sort of holds it back, it's that it is very short, and some places just feel like wasted space, I would say. Again, Cody Freestyle I feel like is a little bit too long, and the interlude just doesn't do anything for me. But other than that, this is like a great like R&B fusion with pop and rock and indie. Like really, Steve is like coming into his own, and I've followed him for a few years, never really been interested in his music, but now I'm finally like seeing the appeal. I feel like everyone else is too. So I'm very happy to say that Gemini Rights is my number 22 pick. Number 21 is Ghetto Gods by Earth Gang. I love this album. This album is very fun, very inspired by, R&B, Southern hip hop. It's just amazing, inspired by gospel as well. And I feel like Earth Gang has reached this point now where like they just consistently produce such fun, engaging, infectious albums. And it's like, I just can't wait to hear more from them. I really hope they release it on the record this year, because their consistency is always, I mean, it's great, amazing consistency, amazing energy. I feel like I know what to expect going into Earth Gang album, but not in a bad way. Like it's something I very much want to hear because it has such a specific vibe, and it always makes me feel like good, like optimistic, like if that makes, sense. Number 20 is going to be Drill Music in Zion by Lupe Fiasco. Lupe is an artist who I feel like is very dense when it comes to his writing, very technical when it comes to his rapping skill, and that stuff is very impressive. But the issue is that sometimes I feel like it can be to the detriment of his actual like output. Like certain albums from Lupe feel just way too dense for me to even like start to get into. And I feel like with Drill Music in Zion, which from what I understand was recorded in like 3 days, Lupe has still packed like a lot of density into the album, but he's done it in a way that doesn't feel like overwhelming. It still feels very accessible, and not like kind of a burden to get through and to analyze. Some tracks here are extremely catchy. Other tracks are just extremely powerful. The last track on Phonem is, I mean, Lord, like if you just go, I would encourage anyone to like listen to the first verse. Lupe really plays with like his writing, and I feel like he does it in such a smart, simple, clever way. I just love that track, and it's really indicative of what he does elsewhere on the album. This is just a great record, like a very solid hip hop album that I probably would have loved 3 years ago, and I still appreciate now, which is kind of weird because I feel like I've very much fallen off conscious hip hop, but Lupe is like doing it well. Like he is a good example of conscious hip hop today. So number 19 is going to be Crest by Blade and Echo 2K. I know Blade and Echo and like all of like the Drain Gang scene are very kind of like contentious in modern music, and I sure as hell have not loved everything I've heard from them. But this album is, it's like the perfect fulfillment of what I think they've been trying to do. It's thematic. It's talking about like death and grappling with like life, and what it means to pass away, and like how we react to the deaths of others. And the sonic palette, very like, cloud rap inspired. It's very fitting here. It feels very like heavenly, but also like digital in this really cool way. Any issues that I might normally have with especially Blade's singing sort of go away here because it does fit very well into that digital aesthetic. And this isn't a record that I've like gone back to a whole bunch. this year, and it's one that I think has definitely grown off me, but I still think some of the ideas here are like so clever and genius. Some of the songs are so like just catchy and amazing. Like the Girls Just Want to Have Fun song is great. I also really like the opening track, The Flag Is Raised. I feel like that's a very catchy, like anthemic start to the album. And then the like 10-minute long kind of like centerpiece of the whole record, 5-Star Crest, is one of my favorite songs of the year. I think it switches beats like 5 times, and I think every single beat is just like immaculate. The performances are great. Like, it is by all means a perfect song, and I feel like it speaks to so much potential in what Echo and Blade are doing, to the point where I genuinely am really interested to see what else they do in the future. And like, this album has sort of like really turned me like onto their style in a major way. Number 18 is Love for Rent by Smino. Smino is an artist that I've always admired, I think more from a distance. I always knew he was like sort of big in the underground R&B scene. I guess not that underground, but you know. So this is the first Smino album I've listened to in full. And honestly, I just cannot like give it enough praise. Like, this is such a fun, creative, inventive spin on R&B that feels simultaneously like experimental, but also like I could play this like at a function, like in the car, like, and nobody's gonna be like, what is this? It's a very specific thing I feel like Smino is able to do, and I think like he has in many ways laid a groundwork over the past few years to make possible this kind of an album where it is kind of weird and eccentric, but also like it feels so distinctly like mainstream, like just R&B. Yeah, I feel like Smino is really carving out his own niche, I would say. Tracks like 90 Proof featuring J. Cole, Old Ass Kendrick, Pro Freak, like they're just so fun. They're so creative. I keep coming back to them over and over again. One that has really grown on me recently is Pudgy featuring Lil Uzi Vert. I think they give a great performance, and I think Smino is like killing it there too. Really every track here brings something unique and important to the table. I would encourage you, if you're like a fan of Gemini Rights and that's kind of like one of the only R&B albums you really enjoy like that, I would definitely encourage you to maybe give Love for Rent a listen, because it is amazing, like genuinely. Next up is my number 17 pick, which is Motomami by Rosalia. I know a lot of people like love this album to death. It was at the top of like very many lists, or at least close to the top of very many end of the year lists that I saw, and I do really enjoy this album. I don't think it reaches the same like heights for me as it does for a lot of other people, but I think it's like very great. This is an album that feels very inspired by like electronic music, but also like pop music and like mainstream like flamenco and stuff like that. I do really enjoy this album. I love a lot of tracks. Chicken Teriyaki is probably like my standout, but there are some other good songs, ones that maybe we should not name on YouTube. This album like rules. Like, this is a really fun, inventive album. It's definitely growing on me as time goes on, and who knows, maybe in like a few months this will have like elevated itself up a few spots. I'm not really sure, but if you're looking for like an inventive, fun pop experience with an experimental flair, like Motomami. Number 16 is going to be No Thank You by Little Sims. This was released at the very, very end of 2022, and I barely had enough time to like really sink my teeth into it, enough to place it on this list, but like Sims has just done it again. So Sims' last album from 2021 was very grand and all-encompassing. It was kind of like, I would say, to this date, like her masterpiece. But I feel like this is so stripped back, barren. The songs are longer, the track list is shorter, and Sims is really just like rapping here, like very, I don't even know if there are features on this. I'm trying to think. If there are features, they're really only like a hook or something. And I mean, Sims just like proves herself once again to be like such a great writer, such a great talent, and I really appreciate the fact that she's been able to strip herself back and like just give us like beats and bars. Like sometimes that's really all you need. I don't think I would say this is better than what came last year, but I would say it's kind of like apples and oranges. And if you liked Sim's last album, I feel like it's very necessary that you should listen to this one. It's almost like a companion piece. Like the last album was this larger than life masterpiece, and this one is this more stripped back, like introspective look into Sims as a person, but it's like still just as impactful and amazing. My number 15 pick is Melt My Eyes, See Your Future by Denzel Curry. I have been a Denzel fan basically since I started listening to rap in like the 9th grade. Denzel was the first rapper I genuinely like heard an album from, and I was like, this is amazing front to back. It was Taboo. Taboo has definitely grown off me with time, and I feel like Denzel kind of has as well. And when I first heard this album, it didn't like floor me. It just felt kind of like the natural progression of what Denzel has been doing for the last few years, but not in like a very flattering way. But as I listen to it more, I kind of have realigned my perspective on it, and I see it now, yes, as a continuation of what he's been doing, but also as like this amazing like continuation of what he's been doing. He's been one of the best rappers in the game for the last few years, from a technical standpoint, from an aesthetic standpoint, and now it feels like he's coming into his own even more. Some tracks here like Walkin' or Troubles or Melt Session 1, like these are like 10 out of 10 rap songs. Really nothing more you could ask for from Denzel. And even the deep cuts on this album, I think, are genuinely great. Most of them don't overstay their welcome, but when Denzel does allow them to get sort of longer, reaching like 5 or 4 minutes, I feel like they justify their run times. They're always bringing something important to the table. I feel like I would like Denzel in the future to take more risk, maybe. But genuinely, I there's only so much like negative things I can say about this album because it is just so good. My number 14 pick is EA Monster by Young Nudy. I, believe it or not, I'm a huge Young Nudy fan. I love pretty much the entire Slimeball series. Nudyland is, I still feel like, his best full project. And I also love like the tape he did with Pierre a few years ago. That was like great. But EA Monster feels like Nudy is like solidifying his spot in rap right now and like immortalizing his image. It's very still tied to all the like eccentricities that I originally like really fell in love with Nudy for, but it has this like very mainstream flair that makes it so like anthemic, and like genuinely every song here, short track list, but like every track is amazing. The intro song, None to Do, great, one of the best Nudy songs ever. And I mean like Sick of Slime, Lunch Meat, these are all like amazing tracks, and there's nothing here that I would cut, honestly. I love this album. I'm really excited to see what Nudy does in the future. I feel like he is building up to like his masterpiece, honestly, like a big mainstream album with a lot of features, with a lot of like effort put into it. Like I just can't wait to see what that looks like. So looking forward to that. At number 13, I have an album that is kind of a mouthful, so bear with me. It is His Happiness Shall Come First Even Though We Are Suffering by Backwash. I love Backwash. I loved her album from last year. I thought it was great. I thought it was this perfect melding of metal, punk, and rap. And I feel like she's just delivered again. You might be able to make the argument that this is a bit derivative of what she's done before, but like she hit on such gold with that last album that like, I mean, who wouldn't want more? I mean, and this album is great. I feel like maybe even that this is a better full album than the one from last year. Just everything here just comes together so well. The production choices are great. The rapping is great. Her technical ability is wonderful. The features are wonderful. And it just feels so like just dark, like, and just aggressive, and like, I love it. And it is like the end of a trilogy that she's been doing, so it does have that sort of like feeling of finality in a really like good and wonderful way. Number 12 is Natural Brown Prom Queen by Sudan Archives. This is the first album I've heard from Sudan, and I was blown away by this. I felt like this was a wonderful like avant-garde piece of R&B. Again, if you're a fan of Gemini Rights, I know a lot of people are, definitely give this album a listen if you're trying to like expand your taste, because Sudan like kills it here. The opening track, Homemaker, one of the best songs of the year. Just an amazing R&B song that goes through like multiple changes and just it's just so great. Like genuinely, I could talk about it all day, but everything else here is also great. Like the title track, wonderful. This is a very like sexual album, so be aware of that. There's a track on here called Milk Me, but like it's great. I feel like the aesthetic is wonderful, the lyrics are wonderful, the singing is amazing, and it just has so much like style to it and such a unique flair. So definitely give this one a listen. Like there's a reason it's up this high for me, and that's because it's great. Number 11 is another kind of melding of pop and R&B, and it is FKA Twigs' Capra songs. I say pop and R&B, but genuinely this is like a melting pot of every single genre. Twigs has really kind of like cut loose here and just made like a fun, enjoyable album that I feel like doesn't have that much like of a thematic core to it. But it just has such like aesthetic beauty. Some of the tracks here, like Ride the Dragon or Poppy Bones or like Tears in the Club, like these are some of Twigs' best songs to date, and it's genuinely just because they sound so good and are so like fun and enjoyable. Genuinely every single track here is great. I could talk all day about like Honda, Metal Angel, Oh My Love, Careless with Daniel Caesar, Darjeeling. Like these are great songs, and I feel like more than half the track list at some point in time has been my favorite song on the album. So like a very consistent like level of quality and greatness, which like very few albums have. So good on Twigs for this. Listen to this album, it's great. I'm excited, of course, to see what Twigs does when or even if she goes back to like the more thematic style of like Magdalene or LP1, but for now this is great. I'm happy with this, so good on Twigs. Number 10 is It's Almost Dry by Pusha T. The second I figured out Pusha T was releasing an album this year, I kind of knew that like it would probably end up on my year-end list, because Pusha is like probably the most consistent rapper that I can think of. Like same subject matter every time, same like usually like style of production, whether it be from Pharrell or Ye. I mean, I feel like I kind of knew what to expect, but every time I know what to expect, and I'm still like blown away by just how well Pusha brings everything together. Like the lyrics are super creative and inventive. He's still finding ways to talk about drugs, like 20 something years since he started rapping. Like the man is an unmatchable talent when it comes to the drug raps, and the production here is great. It's like split between Pharrell and Ye. I feel like Pharrell for me brings more to the album. I feel like his beats are so much more fun, and I feel that Pusha just fits them so much better. That could just be because like I'm an old school Clips fan before I'm really like a new Pusha fan, but I feel like Ye, he holds his own. My real issue is when it comes to Ye's features. Ye is just not a good rapper anymore. I feel like we need to admit that at this point. Like he can produce well, but he just doesn't sound good behind a microphone. But yeah, this is just a really well put together album. I love pretty much every song here. Brambleton, amazing intro. Love that. Neck and Wrist Don't Lie is one of the best songs of the year, period, with Jay-Z and Pharrell producing. Like that shit got me hyped for this album. And I feel like everything else on the record like lived up to the hype that was created by that song. So great album. Number 9 is Dawn FM by The Weeknd. I love The Weeknd, but this is the year that I really like really started to appreciate The Weeknd for like what he does, because Dawn FM is, it's very much a mainstream album, but it's also like this weird like 80s inspired like radio show that's representative of The Weeknd, his character from After Hours being like in purgatory, and it's just so creative and like weird, but it just works so well, and like every song here sounds like a genuine hit. Every song here is great. Every song here I could see going number one and I wouldn't even question it. I feel like this album should have had like honestly more commercial success than it did, because in my opinion this is better than After Hours, like from a pop music standpoint, and also from like just a conceptual like lyrical standpoint. So yeah, where's the love for Dawn FM? Like Sacrifice, Out of Time, Take My Breath, these are all time great Weeknd songs, no question about that. And Less Than Zero, the closing track, is my favorite thing here. I think it's amazing, and I actually was lucky enough to get to go see The Weeknd live this year, and watching him perform at Less Than Zero was like the highlight of my life. So this is a great album. Number 8 is going to be I Love You, Jennifer B by Jockstrap. Jockstrap are like proving themselves to be one of the most interesting creative forces in modern music. Just listening to this album, it's so weird, like it's so unique, and I've heard nothing else like it ever. It's simultaneously emotional and also like funny and also like experimental, but still can be very like stripped back and traditional at parts. There are moments on this album that remind me of like Joanna Newsom, and there are moments on this album that remind me of like Death Grips. Like it's like just all over the place, and I love it. This album feels very much like a debut, but in like the best way possible. And by that I mean like I feel like Jockstrap will like come back in like a year or two and release something new that just like redefines music itself. Like my hopes are very high for them, and this was like a wonderful showing. Number 7 is going to be Renaissance by Beyonce. Beyonce is, I feel like, an artist that just gets better with time. You know, I love the old Beyonce hits, who doesn't? But it seems like for the last like 10 or so years, she's really been redefining herself as like an artist, like that just makes these full, complete, like amazing generation defining albums. Of course, Lemonade is an amazing record that I love to death. It was very thematic, very conceptual, and pulling from a lot of different places. Renaissance feels like the less conceptual, more focused when it comes to influences kind of version of Lemonade. It's Beyonce in peak form, but this time she is like honing in on house music and dance music as her central point of influence, and she's doing it to like great effect. So you're not gonna find any like broad like political statements here for the most part, but what you are going to find is a hell of a good time, and that's really the best thing that I can say about it. These tracks are perfectly crafted for the dance floor, for like just making you feel like you want to move, like get up and go out and do something. And in a world that, you know, just got, I mean, I guess is still kind of in the midst of a pandemic, like that's just a really cool message to hear. I feel like it's something that's very needed, and I feel like this music is very like needed in our modern era. So yeah, and also Beyonce, very much the opposite of Drake when it comes to respecting the Black and queer origins of house music. This feels very soulful, and this feels very much like Beyonce really cares about the musicians she's pulling from and the scenes she's using to, you know, build the aesthetic of her own album. So amazing record. Number 6 is going to be SOS by SZA. I already made like a 20-minute long video about this album if you're at all interested in hearing my further thoughts, but here I'm going to keep it brief. This is a great album. It's super long, but unlike a lot of these bloated ass albums that have come out over the last few years, it really justifies its length with a lot of creative writing, interesting concepts, and Lord, the music itself. Like so many different genres, so many unique like production choices. It's an album that I can't stop coming back to, and for a record that's like 20 plus songs long, it has no right to be this consistently good. I was genuinely stressed when I saw how long the track list was. I was like, Lord, this is going to be another one of these like bloated ass albums. But no, like it genuinely, it feels right. It feels like it deserves to be that long. And shit, I'm waiting on the deluxe. Like, come on. So SOS by SZA, amazing, again, video on the channel about it already. So yeah. Number 5 is going to be Ants From Up There by Black Country New Road. This released like very early on into the year, and I mean, people ate this shit up. Me included. It took me a bit to get like really sold on it, because I feel like Black Country New Road is such a niche like band. Like they make a very specific style of music that if you're not in like the mood for it, it can be sort of be like off-putting, I guess. Like the first track, for instance, like the Space Marine one, I feel like when I first heard it, I was like, what is this like theatrical bullshit, basically? But like over time I really warmed up to it, especially the latter half of the album. Tracks like Snow Globes, The Place Where You Inserted the Blade, Basketball Shoes, these are some of the best tracks of the decade so far. Like genuinely amazing. They're long, but they like are so packed full of content and thematic resonance. You just like really can't hate on them. And I will say about this album, the music is super creative and inventive, but it's matched by the lyrics and the content and the concepts. If you know about Black Country New Road at all, you probably heard that the lead singer of the band left the band like 2 days after this album came out. And I'll be interested to see what they do from here. I'm sure they're gonna keep making great music, but the lyrics and the vocals were like one of my favorite parts of the entire band. So I am gonna miss that. But I mean, as of now, we have this album, and like it is everything that a Black Country New Road album could like really hope to be. So it's great. Give it a listen. My number 4 pick is In the Darkness Hearts Aglow by Wise Blood. And Wise Blood, if you know anything about her, is an artist that is very much indebted to the music of the 70s and plays on this very like retro style, I would say to great effect. Like all these tracks feel like they could have come out in the 70s, but they speak to such modern issues, specifically about like connection, coming together, like finding love. And I feel like that's a theme that we're seeing a lot in music of 2022. You know, in the post like pandemic world, there's very much this push to like return to connection, like to find love and affection for one another. And I feel like Wise Blood is like really playing on that idea and delivering some much needed music for our modern era in a very enjoyable way. Every track here rules to some extent, but I will say God Turn Me Into a Flower is like easily my favorite thing here. I have cried quite a few times to that song. It is beautiful. So my number 3 pick is The Forever Story by Jid. Jid is someone I've been following since basically I started listening to rap, much like Denzel Curry. DiCaprio 2 was one of the first rap albums I ever really like sunk my teeth into. And just to watch Jid's progression over the last few years has been amazing. I feel like he's really come into his own as an artist, and this is the absolute fulfillment of everything he's been building to. This album is unique, it is inspired, it is thematically resonant, it is cohesive. Like there is nothing bad I can say about this record. Every track hits. It has a wider like conceptual theme about family and also like personal identity. Again, sort of going back to this whole theme of like connection that is dominating the post pandemic world. This album is actually kind of hard to talk about because I feel like so much of its genius is very much on the surface, and I feel like if you go out and listen to it yourself, like you are going to see exactly what I'm talking about. Tracks like Dance Now or Surround Sound, like those are unmistakably wonderful songs. Even the deep cuts like System or Can't Make You Change with Ari Lennox, like those are very easily identifiable as great tracks. Jid is just like the next up, I feel like, in rap, and that's kind of undebatable at this point because this album is so good. Yeah, that's why it's my number 3 of the year. My number 2 album from this year is Dragon, New War Mountain, I Believe in You by Big Thief. So I am a really big fan of folk music, both folk music of the past and also folk music that's more modern, like maybe that of like Elliott Smith or someone. And I feel like Big Thief have like melded the two eras of folk perfectly in their music to speak to modern issues, as we're seeing with like the Jid album, the Wise Blood album. This is a record that very much speaks to community coming together, but also like isolation. And I feel like it plays upon like how folk inherently serves as both like very skeletal, isolated music and also music that you hear around a campfire with other people. This album is like 80 minutes long. It's 20 tracks in length, so it's definitely not short, but every single song here feels like it's doing something special, and every track is amazing. The opener, Change, is beautiful. This beautiful, simple folk tune that expertly introduces the entire record. And then I mean, from there you just get like propulsive, very like rural kind of folk music, Spud Infinity especially is this very like backwoods kind of folk song that I love to death. But also you have something like Flower of Blood, which is extremely modern, I would say, and it doesn't feel out of place here. Like everything fits together so well. My favorite track easily is Simulation Swarm. I think that's one of the best songs of the entire year. Thematically, it is like the climax of the album, I feel like, or at least close to it. And lyrically, it is so dense and abstract and poetic, and also like it just has an infectious melody and sonic environment that I cannot get enough of. But really every track here I love. This is one I keep going back to. I can't stop listening to it. And yeah, I love this to death. So it's my number 2 pick of the year. And my number 1 album of the year should probably come as no surprise to anyone who knows me. It is Mr. Morale and the Big Steppers by Kendrick Lamar. I know a lot of people have contentious feelings about this record, but to me it's like the climax of Kendrick's journey so far. We've gone from him breaking onto the scene to sort of espousing like a very important and impactful message, and then reconciling with his status as like a messenger and as like the savior of hip hop, to now he's like rejecting that status that has been placed upon him, sort of taking off that crown of thorns that he, I mean, in some ways has brought upon himself, but in other ways that has been thrust upon him. I will say sonically, this is an amazing album. It's just so diverse, and I feel like every single genre that Kendrick plays in, he does well. And the diversity here is all in service of an overarching theme of every track being sort of like a therapy session. So different moods, different environments. And Kendrick doesn't have so much of like a thematic journey here as he has a spiritual journey. One from sort of being in denial about his own problems to opening up and acknowledging the faults in his life and the outside influences that have caused them. And then ultimately on the second side of the album, he sort of reconciles with his personal faults. He makes peace with them. He comes to a new understanding of his life, and he decides to prioritize himself. Everything here brings something to the table, whether it's the beautiful introduction that is United in Grief, or the anthemic in 95, which feels to me very much inspired by like Meek Mill songs from like the early 2010s, all the way down to like the more mainstream cuts like Die Hard and Purple Hearts, and even like the more very like emotional and difficult sort of skeletal songs like Auntie Diaries or Mother I Sober. I just feel like everything here is so perfectly crafted in a way that really only Kendrick could do. And The Heart Part 5, I know a lot of people don't really see it as a part of the album, but in my view, it is very much like a central piece of the record. One that serves both as kind of like a prelude to the album and also as kind of like an epilogue of sorts. And it's really hard to convey all the themes of this record, all the conceptual ideas of it in this very short conversation about it. But I will announce here that I I am most of the way done with a huge script about this album that I plan to convert into like a podcast sort of thing at some point on the channel. So there's that to look forward to. But yeah, I'm going to link in the description a playlist that I made of my favorite songs of the year. Again, I hope this video, I hope you guys enjoyed it. It was maybe kind of messy at parts. Again, no script, and I'm trying to fit it in at a very like hectic time in my life. But I wanted to get it out. I thought this was an amazing year for music, one of the best, possibly the best that I've ever lived through that I can remember. But I think 2023 has just as much potential to be a great year. So I'm excited to see what the next year holds for music. I loved what came last year. And yeah, until next time, I have been Ellie. You have been wonderful. Bye, guys.